Yeah, it's been a year. It's been the longest I've actually kind of seen something through so consistently and shown up in this way so consistently. And with that has, of course, come a lot of insights, lessons, and just building my own self-awareness. And I really wanted to share my top 10 with you in the hope that it would offer you something. It would offer you some insights, some lessons, some building your own awareness and how it can develop you. So I'm going to share this in the connection of being a leader. So, being a leader, whether that's through leading a team at work, maybe you are the leader of your home, whatever it might be, in the way of you being a leader of yourself, your work, your life, and how these insights have really molded for me over the last year. So, I'm going to dive straight in. Number one, it's daunting and hard at the beginning. Honestly, I wanted to delay starting this podcast so much, but I was working with my coach at the time and she said, you just need to do it. This is going to be a great part of your business. And I was really resistant for a few reasons. How could I be consistent every week? How would I have so much to talk about? Like, I don't have that much to talk about. And it just felt really hard. It felt really hard to show up on the mic, to, research my topics, to get my thinking streamlined, all of those things. But 1 year on, it is so worthwhile to me. So many things that start off really daunting and really hard are usually the things that pay off the most, that are so worthwhile doing. And if you are someone who is wanting to be a leader, who's wanting to make an impact, who's wanting to add value, and that feels hard, that feels daunting, that feels too big, it might be something that is so key. It might be something that is so key to your journey. So see that dauntingness, that bigness as a good sign, as a sign that this is something that could add so much value and power to yourself, to your confidence, to your courage, and that it absolutely is worth pursuing. Insight number two, you aren't great when you start. So, practicing builds refinement and confidence. So, I wasn't necessarily too worried about this. I love speaking. It's definitely one of my strengths. I am more auditory inclined. So, actually getting on the mic and talking comes quite naturally to me. What wasn't great was, how do I link it in to be really valuable for my listeners? How do I link it into being really aligned to the clients that I serve and making sure that I'm speaking in a way that is really beneficial? So that took a lot of practice and refinement for me. And I'm getting better at it. I'm still a year on. There's so much still to learn. There's so much still to refine here for me. But I know that I have developed this skill. I know that I've refined this through practice. And that has only happened because I started. Now, I know a lot of people that I work with are hesitant to start because they don't think that they'll be good. Yeah, that's why you need to start. You're only going to get good by doing it, by practicing it, by developing that skill set, by sharpening that saw, for the cliche term. And if you think about where you're going in your career, if you think about stepping into leadership, if you think about becoming, a valuable, impactful, amazing people leader, you're not necessarily going to be good at that from the beginning, because you need to show up in that role. You need to be in that role, be in those situations to then practice those skill sets. And that's what I've learned with podcasting. I look at these other amazing podcasters and, how incredible they are with the people that they interview, with the reach that they have with their podcast, but they started somewhere. Right? When they released episode one, it may not have been that. That may not have been that reality, but they developed that through time, through practice. So if you are resisting starting something because you don't think that you're going to be good at it, good, start it. Then you will get good at it, but you have to start first. Number three, doubting whether you have anything valuable to share doesn't mean that you don't. So this was absolutely one of the biggest things for me. And if my coach is listening to this episode, she will attest to this. I was like, there is no way that I have value to share. There's no way that people will want to listen to me. There's no way that I can make a meaningful podcast. But here we are, 50 episodes later, 51. Pardon me. 51 episodes later, and I still get feedback that this episode, I just got one last week on LinkedIn saying this episode was bang on. It's exactly what I needed with where I am, and I regularly get that feedback. And if I had listened to my brain, if I had listened to my brain tell me that I don't have valuable and like I don't have anything valuable to share, I don't have anything that's worthwhile, and I never started this, I wouldn't have my messages, my voice, my insights, my way of thinking, my perspectives wouldn't be reaching people that I would never have reached before. And when our brain says things like this, like, oh, you don't have value to share and you should just keep quiet or you shouldn't do this thing, it's your brain's way of staying safe. It's your brain's way of stopping you from potentially getting embarrassed, getting criticized, getting judged, all of those things, which, okay, thank you, brain. But that is not how we live meaningful lives. That's not how we add value. That's not how we make an impact, right? We need to be willing to put ourselves in uncomfortable, situations, not unsafe situations, uncomfortable, like nerve-wracking, or I don't know, there's potential vulnerability here. Those situations are the situations that will stretch us and grow us so much more and will allow us to add value to the people around us. That's being of service. When we can add value to other people, we are being of service to them. That's number 3. Number 4, vulnerability makes the best episodes. The episodes where I have shared a bit more of myself, I've shared a bit more about my mindset, my own challenges, my own struggles, have been the episodes that have generally received the most feedback, that people have shared with me and said, wow, I listened to this episode and I felt like you really saw me, or I could really relate to what you talked about. And, at the time, I question a lot whether I should talk about that thing, whether I should share that thing, like that feels too personal. But it's within the personal that we connect as humans, right? People love to know that you get them, that you see them. And if you think about this in terms of leadership, when we share vulnerability as leadership, when we show parts of ourselves to show that we can be compassionate to the people that we lead, that we show that we get them, they are far, far, far more willing to connect back with us. They are far more willing to lean in. They're far more willing to give what they can for the work or for the cause. So vulnerability is one of the most key ways that we can create connection, that we can create impact. And so vulnerability feels scary. When Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, it's about being emotionally exposed because we don't know how that's going to be received. We don't know what people are going to do with that. However, we need to trust that we are being vulnerable for the best reasons, that we are being vulnerable to create connection and safety and trust, and know that when we are doing that in a way that provides safety for the people around us, they are going to be more willing to be vulnerable back. And that's when we can make the biggest impact. We can add the most value. So, and I will do some episodes on vulnerability, breaking it down, how we can start to strengthen our vulnerability muscle, but it is absolutely something that has a huge impact. Number 5, ego doesn't make for good podcasting. If you do podcasting to look good, if you do it for yourself, if you, do it just to get something in return, it's not going to be very good. It's not going to be very valuable because podcasting is about sharing. It's about giving. It's about adding value through your voice, through your content. And if that comes with a condition that everything that you do has a sell or, has an expectation that you get something in return, the energy of that podcast, those episodes aren't going to be open and giving and unconditional in that way. Like podcasting, and I'm going to talk about this in another point, but podcasting is a long game. Like you don't get an immediate return from doing this, right? But it is a way that you share value and you are of service. So ego is something that we always need to be mindful of and just to build our self-awareness around. Like, am I doing this to look good, or am I doing this to be of service and to be helpful and to be valuable? And if we think about this in the sense of leadership, like ego has no place in leadership. If you are wanting to be a leader from a place of ego to look good, that is probably more directive management, and that is actually quite authoritative and possibly sometimes a little bit narcissistic. So we need to be really mindful of how much of our wanting to look good and create a perception of ourselves is driving this versus are we here to share, add value, and be of service. So this is something that, I mean, I knew this, but coming into the podcasting world, I'm constantly reminded of, you know, sometimes I do get a big return on podcasting, sometimes I don't, but I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it to offer an accessible way to get inside my brain, to know how I think, to learn my ideas and my perspectives, and also to bring in and for me to connect and learn with other people and to grow my own knowledge and skill set. So that is something that was really, really highlighted to me, and that still is highlighted to me. So be really mindful of, yes, we want to do things that do make us feel good, but that isn't the only reason that we're doing it, right? That we can still feel good regardless of whether it goes well or not, and making sure that our sense of self isn't conditional on the results that we're creating. Number 6, perfectionism. Perfectionism has no place here. If you want things to be perfect, do not start a podcast. Do not start a podcast. Don't do it, because you will never get anything out. If you've gone back or if you have been listening to the podcast since the beginning, you'll hear me stumble. You'll hear me kind of rejig my words. And, Lara probably goes through and edits a lot of that stuff out for sure. But also, I'm not here to make my podcast perfect. I'm here to make my podcast relatable. I'm here to make my podcast informative and valuable for you. And if I want it to be perfect, I would never have started. I would never have done anything. And because of that, I don't actually go and listen back to any of my episodes until they are live. So I have gone back and listened to some of my published episodes. So, especially the mindset ones, the comparisonitis ones. I've listened to a few of my guest interviews because I want some insights, but I will never listen to an unedited version of my podcast. I think over the last 51 episodes, I have re-recorded one podcast only, and I think that might have been like maybe my second one, because it was an absolute shambles of a podcast. And this goes back to my point around you're not great when you start, but that's the only time I've ever done that. And there have been times where I've hit stop recording to end the recording, and I haven't felt like it was the best, but I'm like, you know what? It's fine. Because if that one isn't the best one, that's okay. Maybe the next one will be. And also, best is relative, right? Who knows what best really is? So perfection has no place here. And if we think about that in terms of life, like if we are aiming to be perfect, whether that's in our leadership style, in our leadership presence, in the way that we show up in the world, the way that we do things, the way that we connect with people, if we're wanting that to be perfect, we're going to fail, because perfection is not achievable. We can strive for excellence. We can strive to be better each day, but perfectionism isn't the ideal. It's not the place that we want to be trying to aim for, because we're always going to fall short, and then we're always going to feel like a failure, and we're never going to soak in the success. So, for me in my podcasting journey, success has been getting another episode out, getting my ideas out there, speaking through how I'm thinking about things. Like, that is success to me. I don't define success in my podcast of how much revenue did I earn this month for my podcast, because that's very hard to determine right now. How many 5-star reviews am I getting? Like, sure, those are great metrics to determine whether we're hitting the mark and whether I do need to tweak some things. But that's not how I'm defining success. Am I proud of the way that I'm showing up? Am I proud of the way that I'm doing things and my willingness to learn and adapt and grow and be flexible? If so, then I'm successful. That has nothing to do with perfection. So if you are noticing that perfectionism tendencies are showing up for you, whether that's at work or in life, I really want you to just be mindful about how helpful that is for you. Like, what role is that playing for you? And is that helping you to be the person that you want to be? If not, what needs to shift? What needs to change? Number 7, you have more than you think you do, and you know more than you think you do. I honestly thought that I would run out of things to talk about after 5 episodes. And here I am 51 episodes later, still with a run sheet full of ideas. And they're just growing and growing and growing, right? Because the more conversations I have with my clients, the more things I have to talk about and share with you. And I honestly thought that I would run out of things to talk about. And my coach was like, you absolutely won't. Like, trust me. She's been running a podcast for 3 years, 3.5 years, and she just finds more things to talk about. And it's been so true. And I think that this is really important to remember in life, because so often, especially the people that I work with, my clients, they're ambitious, they do want to add value, they do want to make an impact, but they doubt that I talked a little bit about this earlier, that you have value to share. But, so often you're holding yourself back because you don't think you have what it takes, or you don't think you know enough. But here's the thing: the more that you learn, the more that you realize you don't know, right? And the more that you learn, the more that you realize that you want to learn more things. And so, as I've been podcasting, I've realized that there's so much more that I can talk about because I've been talking about stuff, right? And when you think about taking the next step in your career, whether that's to become a leader, whether that's to be able, become more specialized in an area that you wanted to work in, if you're holding yourself back because you don't think you have what it takes, or you don't think you know enough, that's the point. Like, you're not supposed to know everything about the next step. Otherwise, you should already be there, but you're not. Right? You're wanting to develop, you're wanting to grow into that next step. So know that you have enough right now. And once you step in there, you're going to learn more. You're going to learn what you need to learn when you step into that next step. So don't hold yourself back because you don't think you know enough, because I guarantee that you know more than you think you do. You absolutely do. So trust that. Number 9. You don't always hear from everyone who likes what you're doing or takes something away from it. Now, my love language is words of affirmation. Will, like, my heart will explode when people give me good feedback. They praise me. They give me lots of good words. It's my words of affirmation love language. It's like a gold mine to me. And in my first, I think, month of releasing the podcast, I got so much feedback of, wow, this is amazing. I'm so glad you've got a podcast out. This is great. I love this episode. Wow, this is so insightful. And it was top of mind for a lot of people to give feedback because it was new, it was novel, it was something new that I was putting out into the world. A year later, yes, I absolutely still get feedback. I still get, those messages that, wow, this really resonated for me, but it's not as often, right? Like, I'm not getting it almost every day. I'm not getting it necessarily every week when an episode is released. And that doesn't mean that it's not valuable. It doesn't mean that it's not good. It means that people haven't messaged, or they haven't thought to message, or, done, they haven't thought to do that. And it's not in our human nature to like or to comment. Like, when you're walking down the street, you don't just walk up to some random person and be like, hey, I really love what you're wearing today. Or, hey, like, I just really want to have a conversation with you. Or, hey, I love your bag. Can you tell me where it's from? And maybe some people do that, I don't know, but not everybody. It's not in our human nature to do that. It's not in our human nature to put ourselves out in that way so naturally. And so when we think about social media, likes, comments, podcasts, leave reviews, ratings, things like that, like, that's not the natural instinct for people to go and do that. But it doesn't mean that they don't take anything away. It doesn't mean that they don't have the 5-star thinking, or that they really love that episode. It's just that right now they either just forgot, or they just don't think about doing it. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything. If you are doing something and you never get anything back ever, even if you ask, then maybe that's like, food for thought. Be like, okay, like, is there a tweak needed here? Like, who do I need to go and directly ask for feedback to make sure that I'm still, like, on the right path? But ultimately, you know, you're not always going to get that instant feedback. You're not always going to get exactly what you want to hear every time. And that does not mean that what you're doing isn't valuable. That doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't having an impact. And, classic example, I got a message on LinkedIn from one of my previous guests on the podcast. Someone who knows her messaged her on LinkedIn to say, I listened to your episode. I really loved it. I listened to a few other episodes on the Lead with Les podcast. It's now one of my weekly listens. I don't know who this person is. This previous guest of mine happened to share with me because we're good friends. And she said, I want you to let you know that you're making an impact. I would never, like, if she had never thought to pass it on to me, I would never have known about that. But someone has now tuned in to Lead with Less every single week because of one episode. And so I want you to take that insight and go, even if you're not getting praise all the time, it doesn't mean that you aren't doing a great job. Sometimes we need to go out and ask for that and get that feedback, because especially in New Zealand, praise and feedback is not something that's easily given. It's not natural and it's not part of the culture here. So we need to seek it out when we want it. And and also, like, when you are stepping into leadership in particular, if you are a leader of a team, you're not necessarily going to get praise all the time. It's going to start feeling very few and far between. And so you need to build that resilience within yourself. You need to self-recognize where you're doing a great job, what you're proud of, what you're doing that, feels really in alignment with you. And where you do want that feedback, go in and seek it out. Go and ask for it. That doesn't mean anything. It just means that you want feedback so that you know what you're doing well, so you can keep doing that thing and know where you can develop and grow. That's all it is. Went off on a bit of a tangent there, classic. And my last one, my biggest insight from the last year on the podcast was, this has been such a key part of my growth. Now, everything that I share on the podcast are things that I actively coach on, things that I actively practice, things that I'm going through right now. And I also research a lot when I'm preparing for episodes. I research my guests when I have them on so that I know them and I can talk, to them and more personalized in that way. So it keeps me curious and it keeps me growing. It keeps me on top of what's going on. It helps me to look for trends and insights and things that I could speak to that could be really valuable to you as my listeners. And I think that that's such an important skill to harness and to cultivate, is growth and making sure that you're staying curious about what's going on. And the more that you do that, the more that you're going to develop yourself, the more that you're going to develop your potential, the more that you're going to be able to add value. And I would say to do this on things that aren't just in your line of expertise or in alignment with your technical capabilities, but where are the things that you are interested in? Where are the things that spark excitement for you? Where are the things that you want to, stretch yourself in, and start learning more about those things? Where are your gaps and where you can develop those? And the podcast has definitely been a key part of that for me, because I want to continue to be supportive and helpful to you, the listeners, and how I can help you develop your career, how I can develop your confidence, your courage, your leadership. And part of that is me doing that for myself as well. So those are my 10 insights. My 10 insights over the last year of podcasting. It's daunting and hard at the beginning, which means it's worthwhile. You aren't great when you start, but practice builds confidence. You always have something worthwhile to add. So even if that feels doubtful, you still have so much to add. Vulnerability makes for the best episodes. Where you tactfully use vulnerability to create a connection with your audience or with your people, you're going to have the best chance of creating connection, safety, and trust. Ego doesn't have a place for good podcasting or in good leadership. So be mindful of why you're doing things and what you're expecting in return. Perfection has no place here. So if you are wanting to be perfect, it's probably not the thing for you, but also perfection has no place anywhere in life. So if perfectionism is your Achilles heel, if it's, holding you back, really encourage you to work through that. You have more value than you think you do. You have more to add than you think you do. So if you are doubting whether you can take the next step, whether you can do the next thing, that's one of the reasons why you need to do it, because you will develop and grow once you're there. It's the long game. Podcasting is the long game, and leadership is also the long game. So if you are wanting to develop your leadership skills, your leadership capability, it's the long game. So building patience, building flexibility in thinking, and really having that curiosity and growth orientation is what's going to make the biggest difference. You don't always hear from everyone who likes what you do. So don't use that as the only measure of whether things are working or not. Make sure that you build your own self-recognition practice for yourself. And where you do need and want feedback, make sure you ask for it. Such a key part of developing your own skill sets, closing your own gaps, and also developing your leadership skills as well. And lastly, this has been about keeping me curious and keeping me growing. Where the more curious we can stay, the more growth orientated we can be, the more that we will develop, the more that we will harness our skills, the more that we will cultivate our strengths, which is a key part in building success. So those are my 10 insights and lessons from the last year of podcasting. I hope that they were really insightful for you. I hope that I was able to create a connection of how they might relate for you in your life. And I really hope you enjoy it. And if you want to know more about working with me, you can check out the link in the show notes to learn more about the different ways that I coach people. I have made a really big decision recently to change the name, structure, and components of my leadership program, which is now called VIP Leaders, Value, Impact, People Leaders. So if that is something that you might be interested in, you want to find out a bit more about, then you can check out the link below. Big, huge decision that I have made in my business, and I will do a podcast episode all about that as well. So I hope you enjoyed this one. If you want to give me feedback, please do. I would really love that. And if there's anything else that you want me to talk on, if there are topics that you want me to share more about, please feel free to share them with me. All right. Have